And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of MLS History Retold on the Designated Players and MLS podcast. On today's episode, we are going back in time to relive, somewhat begrudgingly, the 2008 MLS playoffs, a playoff run so heartbreaking that we simply could not tell it on our own. So to help us out, we've brought along very special guests and a first to MLS History Retold, a first-time guest, Wei and John from Into The Crewniverse. How's it going, guys? How are you?
Hi, I'm John.
I'm Wei.
I'm doing well.
We're from the Into the Crewniverse podcast. We do a podcast that's for new fans of the Columbus Crew. We talk all about the history of the crew. We review the games and whatnot, but our focus is we try and talk about like things that new fans might not know in crew fandom. So if you're going to the game for the first time and you want to show up to the tailgate and you don't know none of the players' names, and you want to know, we'll help you out with that. That's our goal.
You only got to know Nagby.
He's the most important one.
We just recorded an episode about Save the Crew, so that should be coming up pretty soon. That's a very important thing in crew history. So if
I would argue
in the crew,
I'd argue John is probably the most important thing that's happened to this team,
with the exception of the death of the Zogs.
Oh, that rip in peace, the Zogs.
I love it. Well, as you can tell, they are a perfect fit for the MLS History Retold series. And then I guess I had no choice but to bring along Connor as well. Connor, hi.
We're a package deal. You can't get rid of me.
You doing all right, buddy?
I'm all right. Yeah.
Good. Well, listen, today's episode is going to be a lot of fun, a lot of pain, a lot of craziness. We're going to talk about two very different paths to the MLS Cup final of 2008. Columbus Crew made their way through the Eastern Conference bracket after winning the Supporters' Shield on the backs of Guillermo Barros-Schelotto, as well as a massive game-winning header by Chad Marshall in the Eastern Conference final. Meanwhile, Red Bull barely snuck into the final play-in spot of the playoffs that year and were placed into the Western Conference side of the bracket. They too found form at the right time to make it to the final game, where hearts were broken. My guess is cheating likely took place. I mean, that's the only explanation for it. And the fate of Metro history was changed forever. Sorry, this isn't a Red Bull-centered history episode. I'll have to reel that
Every
in.
episode is a Red Bull-centered history episode. You can
You're
never
dang
shut
right
up about
it is,
Red Bull.
baby. You're dang right it is. But it doesn't matter whether it's Red Bull history, crew history, MLS history, or anything in between. We always got to hit ourselves with a scarf or hat of the week. So I got Wei on the top of my screen. So we'll go to Wei first. Wei, what are you rocking?
All right, I've got the 2008 MLS Cup Playoffs scarf. I was a bit too young for this when I was a kid, but I actually found this at an antique store when my wife and I were on vacation, and I was like, I have to get that. There's no way I'm going to leave without that.
Perfect. What an on-brand and perfect scarf. I love it. And then we'll go to John. John, what are you rocking?
I don't own any scarves, so I have the Zog hat from Supporters Supply, because I am, as you can tell, the number one Zogs fan. I'm a Zog head. And one cool thing about this hat is it has a little secret right there.
It's like I'm seeing double. It's crazy.
There's a little hidden Connor. He's like a little Ninja Turtle peeking out, trying to get pizza.
Oh man, that is funny. Yeah, so there's going to be a whole separate episode on the Zogs, it sounds like, with the level of knowledge over there. So we're going to have to fit that in at some point. But stick around for the end of the episode when we get some really cool facts to tease you onto that episode. And while we wait, we'll ask Connor which one of his 4 scarves he's brought out today.
I have more than 4 scarves, mind you. I only have one Columbus scarf. I know you said before the show, you're like, oh, you have 4, just break one of them out. No, I only have one, but it is fitting because it is an MLS Cup Columbus scarf. So it is also on brand, the wrong MLS Cup, but it's close enough. We'll take it.
Is that the 2020 Cup, or when was that one?
This one is 2020.
2020. I have another 2021 here, which was when I got the 2-star scarf when they won their second cup. I bought one that has 2008 and 2020 on it.
2020 is actually the year I was born, so
I do remember you saying that.
I gotta tell you, man.
That's a bit from our podcast I'm bringing.
I listened to y'all's episode, and that threw me for a loop. Where you were born about 8 different times, and
Every single time that I mention a year, John always has to go, "This is the year I was born."
I
At
love
least
it.
once an episode. It's on our bingo card, so I have to do it for the fans.
Yeah, we made a bingo card that if fans want to listen to our episode, you can like play bingo along with like the stuff that we say in almost every single episode.
We probably need to make one of those then, because
easily.
we've got a
Make an
couple
entire bingo card just off of Red Bull stuff you say.
correct. Speaking of, we are rocking once again out of the unkept scarf closet. We're rocking a nice Red Bull scarf.
Scarf of the losers.
That's a nice scarf.
Yeah,
It's very
so
nice.
this one's a good one. Again, it was just the first one that was on top, but I brought it out with the quarter zip, and I got the hat too because I'm 3v1 here, so I had to deck it out. So there's a lot to go through. This is the first time we're doing 3 stories at once, but I do believe that we are going to start with the Columbus Crew path to the final, Chad Marshall's header in the Eastern Conference final game, and that is a Connor story. So we'll send it on over to Connor.
All right, so I'll start things off as always, citing my sources. I used Wikipedia, SBI Soccer, Columbus Crew at Kansas City Wizards, Match Night Commentary by Yves Galarsa, and then also a blog post by Steve Sark called Brian McBride, Columbus and the Crew. So there are hot starts to seasons, and then there's winning 6 of your first 7 games to start off the year. The team to accomplish this feat would be the 2008 Columbus Crew, but we're not here to focus on their regular season performance. Yes, Jim Mora, we're talking about the playoffs. With all that said, we really should do a quick recap of the regular season to set the stage for the playoffs. The Crew were heading into the season looking to rebound after not making the playoffs in 2007. The team was headlined by players like Guillermo Barros-Schelotto and Alejandro Moreno, as well as some younger guys on the come up like Chad Marshall and Brad Evans. As mentioned before, the season couldn't have started any better with the team making a statement by winning 6 of their first 7 games. If there's one thing I've learned from my time doing MLS history, it's that teams love to go on good and bad runs. Consistency be damned. In that exact fashion, the Crew followed this terrific start with a terrible one that saw them get 2 wins in 10 games. I think at this point you all know what's coming next. The Crew followed this up with a 9-game unbeaten streak that saw them win 7 of those 9. When the Crew were hot, they were unstoppable this season, and these amazing runs of form are what landed them the 2008 Supporter Shield, finishing 11 points clear in the Eastern Conference of second place Chicago Fire. This meant that they would be facing off against the KC Wiz in the first round of the playoffs. Now, anyone who's seen the 2008 standings might be confused as to why they didn't get matched up against New York Red Bulls, who finished below the KC Wiz. Because MLS, that's why. Andrew will probably go into more details about Red Bulls' playoff run, but because only 3 teams made the playoffs from the Western Conference, the Red Bulls were considered a Western Conference playoff team. Never change, MLS. Never change. Anyway, the first round is a home and away, best score in aggregate moves on. So the first leg was to be played in Kansas City. Boy, did this seem like an exciting game. The second half is where all the action takes place, and it starts in the 53rd minute when Davy Arnaud gives the Wiz the lead and a great opportunity to make the most of the home advantage. The Wiz would maintain the lead well, but boy, did it get much more difficult. In the 75th minute, Hercules Gomez of the KC Wiz would get a straight red card to put the Wiz down to 10 men. As described by SBI, Robbie Rogers came on Gomez on a clean tackle, and when Gino Padula raced in to get the ball, Gomez stuck the leg out late and caught him. Golarsup's instant reaction was that the straight red was harsh and probably should have been a yellow. However, he would later come back and say that on another look, he felt that the red was more justified. Do with that information what you will, Wiz and Crew fans. Nonetheless, the Wiz were down to 10 with 15 minutes plus stoppage time left to hold their lead. Stoppage time begins and the Wiz still have the lead. The finish line is in sight. However, in front of the home crowd, heartbreak strikes as the Crew's Steven Lennart taps in a loose ball in the 92nd minute to level the score for Columbus. The score would end 1-1, and the Crew would be in a much better shape heading back to Columbus, where they had to feel confident about moving on to the next round. And feel confident they did, as they would take down the Wiz at home 2-0 to move on to the conference finals 3-1 on aggregate. The conference finals would see them take on the Chicago Fire, From here on, all rounds are decided by one game, meaning that since the Crew were the higher seed in the playoffs, they were able to host this game, which will take us to Columbus Crew Stadium. As mentioned earlier, the Fire finished second in the East and third in the Shield, so this was not a team you could take lightly, especially since neither side could find a win in their 2 matchups in the regular season. The Fire would get things started in the 29th minute when Cuauhtemoc Blanco would take a quick throw-in to find Justin Mapp down the left flank. Mapp would cross the ball into the box and find who else but Columbus Crew legend Brian McBride, who heads it home to give the Fire the lead. McBride does give a bit of a celebration after scoring, but nothing too over the top. However, you can also hear during the clip the announcer talking about how McBride has been booed throughout the night. So this goal is definitely not going to help his image with the fans. Now, the reason for the boos could possibly be explained by a section in a blog post made by Steve Sirk, where he talks about McBride making the decision to come back to MLS after his spell with Fulham. Fans were seemingly upset at McBride's decision not to come back to the Crew, but instead go to their rival Chicago Fire, with the reason being that he wanted to play for his hometown team. It likely hurt all the more, as Sirk discusses how McBride almost came back to Columbus in 2007 to become their first ever designated player. However, he was able to get a new contract from Fulham, which kept him there for another year. So when the sides met up in the Eastern Conference Finals, he was booed and also put on a wanted poster tifo, with his crime being treason. According to Sirk, McBride was a good sport about it and understood where their anger was coming from and held no grudge against the fans. I think with time, the Crew fans have also gotten over it and remember him very fondly now. So halftime rolls around, and the Crew are 45 minutes away from elimination. Someone is going to need to step up and make something happen. After halftime, the Crew would waste no time getting themselves back in the game. In the 48th minute, Eddie Gavin draws a foul down the right side, giving the Crew a free kick in a decent spot. There's one man you don't want standing over the ball, and that's GBS, the assist king. After everyone is set, GBS crosses the ball into the box towards Chad Marshall, who is one-on-one with the defender. Marshall rises up clear of the defender to hit a powerful header off the crossbar and past Firekeeper John Bush to make it 1-1. Now, I've been purposely vague about who said Fire defender is, because of course it was none other than Brian McBride, the Crew legend we were just talking about before. Sweet revenge for the Crew fans in attendance who had to watch him score against his former side earlier in the game. Columbus now had the momentum carrying them, with plenty of time still left in this game to find a winner. Despite having plenty of time, Columbus would waste none of it, as in the 55th minute, Alejandro Moreno intelligently heads a bouncing ball into the path of Eddie Gavin, who was sitting on the shoulder of the defense. The header was perfectly placed and allowed Gavin to take a touch with his left and finish with his right to put the Crew up 2-1. Despite a late onslaught from the Fire, they would never test Hesmer too much, allowing the Crew to hold on and move to the MLS Finals, where they would face off against legendary Western Conference opponents, the New York Red Bulls. And that's a perfect way to transition into the next story.
Well, we're not even going to transition yet. I can't believe you went there and name-dropped friend of the pod, John Bush, after getting dunked on by Chad Marshall. That's wild. I personally would never.
He didn't really get dunked on. There wasn't much Bush could have done there, honestly. It was a good header.
I personally would never.
It was tough to name drop him after conceding a goal, but I wanted to get his name in there because he is friend of the pod.
I'm really glad that you talked about the wanted for treason 2-stick that was at that game. That's one of my favorite little tidbits from the 2008 run. I think that 2-stick is an all-timer, to be honest.
It was really well done. I think it was perfect for the moment, but I can understand why Crew fans were definitely upset, especially like after learning that he kind of like not turned them down in 2007, but like had the opportunity to come back and stayed in England. That probably like stung a bit worse. But what's your take? Do you think Crew fans have mainly gotten over that? It seems like it.
For sure. Brian McBride is one of the most revered players that we've had in history, and I think that everyone regards him at top tier. Yeah, I don't think there's any hard feelings from 2008, especially considering that they did win the cup. So if they lost in the Eastern Conference Final, maybe it would be a little bit different. It might feel a little bit. It might feel a little bit worse, but I don't blame the guy. He wanted to go play for his hometown club in Chicago. He's had a very long career. He had a very, very long career in Columbus. So, he spent his time here and he wanted to end his career at home. I don't fault the guy for that.
Yeah. He's one of the greats. If he wants to play at home, let him play at home.
Yeah. I don't think we can really argue with him with his pedigree.
All right. Well, Connor was hinting at a couple things that led straight into my story. So I won't even go with a clever transition because he took that opportunity away from me. But
I set you up. I threw the alley oop, and then you just watched the ball go out of bounds.
listen, there's a reason. There's a reason why I assist you and you don't assist me, because you're not good at it. But if you are an avid listener of MLS History Retold, you were around way back when, aka last episode, when we covered Danny Sapero's goal, becoming the first goalkeeper in MLS history to score from open play. At the end of that story, we hinted at how that game set up a storied run of games, taking Red Bull to its first ever MLS Cup final. And here is how that went down. So for those of you who inexplicably were not there when we told that story, first off, go back and listen to it. You'll really enjoy it. But second off, let's tell you what really happened. Danny Sapero got the start and goal after John Conway and Jeff Park were both suspended for performance-enhancing drug use, with just 2 games left in the season. At the time, Red Bull sat in the playoff spots with 36 points and needed at least 1 win and a little bit of help to head into that final day with some hope against top-of-the-table Columbus and third-place Chicago. Now, at the time, as Connor hinted to, MLS uses a funky little wildcard playoff system, meaning that there were 6 playoff teams that were awarded to the top 3 in each conference, and then the next best 2 teams would make up the final group of 8. And that was regardless of conference alignment. So with 2 games left, both wildcard spots were up for grabs, with the Red Bulls, KC Wiz, Colorado, DC, Dallas, Toronto, Galaxy, and San Jose, which, for those of you keeping count, were all the teams that were not already in the top 6. They were all within touching distance and ready to make a run into the playoffs depending on how the results went. We already know how Danny Sapero's goal and standout performance gave Red Bull 3 points in that game against the Columbus Crew, and it put them in a great spot heading into the final day. Even though that they would go on to lose the last match of the season, we know that they got a ton of help from Colorado, DC, and Dallas, meaning that in 2008, they snuck into the last playoff spot. And because of that, they would be assigned to the Western Conference bracket in position W4. Again, an oddity at the time, but not something completely foreign to teams in 2008 MLS, because with 14 teams in the league, they each played each other 3 times in conference, 2 times out of conference, which means Red Bull had experience against all of the teams in the West they had a chance to play. Starting off with the Western Conference champions and Supporters Shield runner-up, Houston Dynamo. During that 2008 season, in the regular season, they had lost 1-0 away, but triumphed with a massive 3-0 win at home. And regardless of recent success, Red Bull were in for a fight because this Houston side was chock full of talent from front to back. They had the likes of Pat Onstead, Bobby Boswell, Ricardo Clark, Brad Davis, Dwayne De Rosario, Kai Kamara. I mean, you look anywhere on the field and they've got high-quality MLS talent in 2008. So they would need to be on their best performance in this 2-legged affair to advance to the conference finals. First match was played away from home at the wonderful Giant Stadium with a lovely NFL logo smack in the middle of the center circle, just as you expected from an MLS game. A barren football stadium housed just over 11,500 fans, and when the whistle went, the match and the series kicked off. The first half actually started in favor of Red Bull, who naturally played the more aggressive as the home side. Then things get chippy as Dane Richards was shown a yellow card for a strong foul in the 29th minute, which midfielder Brian Mullen took offense to. His reaction to said tackle was also rewarded with a yellow card for his actions. The half would end level at 0 apiece, with the team still feeling each other out. Knowing a quarter of this series was gone, it was time for somebody to step up, and who else better to step up for the New York Red Bulls than their designated player, Juan Pablo Angel. After a save from Sapero gave Red Bull possession in the 47th minute, he sent the ball upfield, eventually finding its way to John Wolyniec. Out on the left-hand side, he cut the ball back into the air across the box to find the head of Juan Pablo Angel, who nodded it home to the lower right-hand corner to give the Red Bulls a 1-0 lead. What a start for the Western Conference playoff team. The ensuing minutes were back and forth as teams exchanged chances until the 66th minute when Kai Kamara was introduced into the match. While he was slowly trying to get involved, his name was finally called in the 89th minute, where a wide service from Stu Holden would find his feet at the center of the box. He put his left foot on the ball, and it was sent into the lower left-hand corner, leveling the score at 1. Red Bull would press to get one back, but to no avail, and the first leg ended in a 1-1 draw. Now, I know what everybody's thinking. An 89th minute leveler to head into the second leg away from home to a team at the top of the Western Conference that just won back-to-back MLS Cups. This stinks of That's So Metro, doesn't it? But this would be a terrible story if that was the case. The second game kicked off away from home. They traveled to Houston to play the final leg in front of 30,000 fans at Robertson Stadium. They were eager to see another deep playoff run, maybe a third straight MLS Cup. However, this game was dominated by two people: Red Bull goalkeeper Danny Sapero and Red Bull winger and speedster Dane Richards. Early in the match, it seemed that Houston just dominated the entire first 15 minutes. They put their first chance of the match just wide 6 minutes into the game and continued that pressure all the way through until the 21st minute, when Red Bull would settle in and find their own chance that hit the post in the 21st. The affair was cagey, knowing that any mistake could mean the end of your club's playoff hopes that year. Then, the breakthrough. In the 25th minute, a long pass from childhood favorite Sinisa Ubi-Parapovic seems to miss its intended target, a checking Juan Pablo Angel. But any ball played into space is a good ball for Dane Richards. He picked up the pace, picked up the ball, gets in behind Wade Barrett, created separation off the dribble, went one-on-one with Pat Onstead, and blasted it over his right shoulder to give Red Bull a 1-0 lead and a 2-1 aggregate scoreline. Now, Red Bull knew they needed to keep the pressure because the away goal rules did not apply. So all Houston had to do was match their score to stay in it. As Houston pushed to try and get one back, the game got stretched very quickly. And just a few minutes later, it was Houston on the attack again. Time for Sapero to earn his stripes. A service from the left side found the head of an unmarked Wayne De Rosario, who put a powerful header on goal. But Sapero was equal to it. In the ensuing attack for Red Bull, it was time for more of the Dane Richards show. He picked up the ball on the halfway line, flicked it over the top of Wade Barrett, gets down the line, and serves it into the box, where it struck Ricardo Clark's outstretched arm, awarding a very easy penalty to New York Red Bulls, which Juan Pablo Angel converted confidently to the left-hand side. Now, just 2 minutes after that, a hopeful long ball skipped into Sapero, who ventured out of his box to play it with his feet. His first touch was as bad as Connor's, and it deflected off danger man Brian Ching and back towards the empty net. Luckily for Red Bull and Danny Sapero, the ball bounced up high enough for Sapero to recover and claim the ball over Brian Ching before he could put it away. This first half would end 2-0 in favor of the good guys, with Houston needing a massive second half to keep their playoff dream alive, and they came out knowing that. Headed into the second half, it was all Houston, who had the ball in Red Bull's half for pretty much the entire game. The first 10 minutes were a massive wake-up call to Red Bull. At the 52nd minute mark, Kai Kamara picked up a loose ball and slid it into Brian Ching, who was 1v1 with Danny Sapero 12 yards out. He came off his line nice and quick to make another smart stop and keep hold of the 2-goal lead, just for another chance 5 minutes later from a corner that Sapero kept out athletically by tipping the ball off of the bar. He clearly recovered well from the near mishap in the first half, but needed to stay strong because Houston were not stopping. Unfortunately for Houston, it was one of those nights where you were just inches off of everything you tried to do, missing tap-ins from crosses by the length of a toenail or the aglet on a shoelace. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and Red Bull knew that. At 75 minutes, once again, it was Sapero keeping a wicked Brad Davis effort out from distance by getting his fingertips to the ball and tipping it over the bar. That led to a corner, which was sent in, bounced around multiple players, and fell to the feet of an unmarked Dynamo player, whose effort from 12 yards was kick saved by Daniel Sapero yet again. Not bad for a rookie who was thrust in last minute because of a PED scandal. After absorbing so much pressure on the defensive end, something had to give. And give it did, but not in Houston's favor. At halftime, Wade Barrett, who had been tortured by Dane Richards all match, was replaced by a bit more pacey Corey Ash in hopes of nullifying the impact of the Jamaican winger's speed. However, those hopes were squashed at the 81st minute, when Dane Richards picked up the ball in space and avoided not one, not two, but 3 tackles from different Dynamo players in an all-out sprint to the Houston penalty area. After collecting the ball, he squared it to an on-rushing John Wolenek, who tapped it home to secure the win for the New York Red Bulls. After the elation of this match, one which practically no one expected Red Bull to come out victoriously, it was easy to forget that they had to turn around and play another match out west in just 6 days against Real Salt Lake, the third-place finishers in the West. They had just beaten Chivas USA 3-2 on aggregate to make it to this conference finals, and in the regular season, Red Bull had fared well against RSL, winning 2-1 at home and picking up a 1-1 draw away. However, they would need to find a way to get all 3 points on the road in this one-legged conference final if they wanted a chance at their first ever MLS Cup final. Like Houston, RSL boasted an impressive side at Rio Tinto Stadium, and they traveled to a packed-out 20,000 fans to take on the likes of Nick Rimando, Jameson Olave, Kyle Beckerman, Will Johnson, Clint Mathis, Javier Morales, and Yura Movsisian. At 6 p.m. on the 14th of November, Jair Marufo blew his whistle and the boys were off. Strangely enough, it was Red Bull on the front foot from the start away from home as John Wolyniec got on the end of a long service and volleyed one towards the goal that Nick Rimando did really well to keep out down to his right-hand side. Then trouble brews, as in the 23rd minute, childhood favorite, Ubi Parapovic, was forced off with an injury to be replaced by Jorge Rojas, who had played all of just 11 matches for the New York Red Bulls to this point. But the substitution cards, and yes, I say cards and not boards because MLS was not fancy enough for electronic boards at this point, went up and change was made. And from the instant that change was made, RSL went on the attack. Yura Movsisian picked up the ball on the left-hand side, cut inside, and fired a shot that was stopped very well by Danny Sapero. Not a great vibe after the injury. Nerves were clearly building for Red Bull, but they were about to be calmed as a ball from Dave Vandenberg was played into John Wolyniec on the left-hand side. He did very, very well to hold off the strong Jameson Olave's challenge and turn in towards goal. He got to the end line and squared it to an on-rushing Juan Pablo Angel, but it was too close for Nick Rimando, who collapsed to his left and parried it away. However, the ball fell right to the foot of Dave Vandenberg, who continued his run from the defensive end and tapped it into an empty net to give Red Bull the 1-0 lead and 1 foot in the door of the MLS Cup final. Elation spread all across the Red Bull bench and players on the pitch, but they knew that they had to see this out because the last thing anybody wanted to do is try their luck in penalties against Nick Rimando. Elation just turned to near dread in the 38th minute when Javier Morales stood over a free kick from 35 yards, floated a ball into the box looking for the foot of Clint Cletus Mathis. He swung at it and missed, and the ball hit off the post and came out. Just a shoelace on that ball, and this story may not even be told today. With a little bit of luck, Red Bull will go into the break up a goal. And by the 55th minute of the game, Red Bull was in full bunker mode. 11 men behind the ball, defending for their lives, meaning it was time for more of the Sapero show. Robbie Russell picked up the ball on the right side, cuts in, and hits a Trivela shot towards the Red Bull goal. Sapero was alert to the danger and parried it away for a corner. RSL would continue on for the rest of the half, playing good combo splits off of Movsisian and Javimo, but could not find the equalizer. In the 70th minute, Movsisian thought he had it, as the combo split sent him 1v1 with Sapero, but his chipped effort was brushed away by the fingertips of Sapero, keeping Red Bull just barely in the lead. While RSL continued to push, and much like the Houston match, the chances they were missing was by a layer of leather on their boots. Red Bull's MLS Cup final hopes looked to be done and dusted in the 80th minute, when RSL gets in behind again with Robbie Finley, who beats an on-rushing Sapero to the ball and squared it for a wide-open Will Johnson on the back stick. Unmarked with an open goal, he sprinted as fast as he could to get to the ball, slid with an outstretched leg to meet it, and just put it off the post and out as Red Bull scrambled to clear. Red Bull hung on by the skin of their teeth as RSL had one last gasp in the 94th minute, sending a long ball forward and everybody into the box. It was crossed in, bounced around until it fell to the foot of the ever-dangerous Javier Morales. His first effort was blocked, but fell right back to him. He took a touch, it fell to his left foot, and he hit it. With pace and power, and time froze as everybody on both sides, including Danny Sapero, watched the ball fly towards the goal. Somebody in Red Bull land must have sold their soul for this match to give us the luck that we had, because instead of flying into the bottom corner, as we in Red Bull land have become so accustomed to, it hit the post again and came out. Jair Marufo blew for full time, and the Red Bull, through luck, magic, and probably some backdoor deals with the devil, won the Western Conference and made it to their first and only MLS Cup final to date.
I love the thought that someone in Red Bull land sold their soul to just get into the finals, just have them lose.
That's a monkey's paw situation right there. Please, can we get in the final, please? But hey, you never said we were going to win the final, man.
Listen, I'd do something just for a striker that can score a goal right now. So I don't know how much that's worth, but I got a little bit of soul left to sell.
Well,
No,
I think you need to be happy that at least you're not a New York City FC fan, because think about it this way, it could always be worse, you know?
Dude, I'm from St. Louis. You do not have room to talk.
Oh, poor John. Okay.
In an ever-changing world, the term AI gets thrown around pretty frequently. But what does it really mean? Is it a self-functioning robot set to take over the world, like in the movies?
Is it the world's next supercomputer? Are your children asking you these questions and you don't know how to respond?
Well, don't you worry, because our friends at AI Digitales are here to help. AI Digitales and AI for Kids podcast can answer all of these questions and more with a family friendly and kid focused approach. As an engineer myself, I've always loved learning new things in any way that I could, and AI Digitales has the perfect approach for all ages.
This pod is centered around shorter, easy to consume, and most importantly, fun content that is separated by age level. So you won't have 4 hours of Andrew going on about RBNY before you get to the good stuff. Their episodes are split to engage elementary, middle plus, and even some parent focused content to get the concept of AI across to all levels.
So, if you or your kids ever want to know how your phone recognizes your faces to get unlocked, or how games know when to naturally get harder without you changing the settings, give a listen to the AI Digitales and AI for Kids podcast today.
Okay. Well, boys, does that mean you guys are going to hand it off to us?
Yeah,
We're gonna
so
take care of
we
this
talked
last part.
about how both teams got from where they were in the regular season up to the final. Let's turn it over to our friends from Into the Crewniverse to tell us how that game allegedly went down.
Allegedly, yeah.
Allegedly. Yeah,
All right.
All right.
Well, right off at the top, I want to shout out the resources that we used. We listened to one of my favorite resources for this, and when also I did the same when we did the 2008 during our podcast. I listened to this great podcast called The Cup from 97.1 The Fan. It was created by JD Smith, who is one of the local radio hosts down there in Columbus, and we also used Steve Sirk's A Massive Season, which is a fantastic book written by Steve Sirk, all about the 2008 season. So a lot of the stuff that Connor was talking about was actually in there. I love Steve Sirk's books. I love all of his resources and used a lot of it during our research and our podcast. So and we also rewatched the game on Apple TV because they let you rewatch all the MLS Cup highlights and the whole game actually, and I really enjoy watching that game to make me feel good inside sometimes. So we rewatched some of that.
When the Crew blows it, we go and watch that game.
Yeah, that and the Eastern Conference Final from last year against Cincinnati. If I'm having a really bad day, I go watch that Eastern Conference Final. It just fills me right back up with joy. Okay, so the 2008 Cup Final was held at a neutral location at the Home Depot Center in Los Angeles, California, which is actually then it was the home of the LA Galaxy and Chivas USA. But despite being held over 2,000 miles away from Columbus, and it still felt like a home game for many of the Crew players. Because Frankie Hayduck, Duncan Outen, and Robbie Rogers all were from Southern California in one way or another. You know, some of them had family there, some had grown up there, some of them had gone to colleges there. And so, you know, they had a lot of friends and family that were at the game and ready to cheer on. And the Crew also had a large contingent of what was then in 2008, the Nordeck formed because where all the supporters groups were sitting in the historic Crew Stadium, they actually cut off a section of that and forced them all to sit in this one corner. And now they call themselves the Nordeck. So 2008, the Nordeck decided they were going to all head out west to Los Angeles, and they formed what they called Nordeck West. And you can actually see, if you watch the replay, a mass of yellow shirts in the northwest corner, which is in the exact same spot that they would be located at in Crew Stadium. So they had a lot of support from both friends and family and a lot of yellow shirts in the stadium cheering them on for the game.
Before the game started, interviews indicated that the Crew had a lot of confidence going into the game. You know, they were feeling themselves, and that's important. When you feel good, you play good. You feel good, you play good, you win. But then when the game actually started and the whistle blew, the Red Bulls were mostly in control of the game. Siggy Schmid said in an interview afterwards that the plan was to try and draw the New York Red Bulls out of their usual defensive style so that the Crew could create attacking opportunities. The first 20 minutes was mostly controlled by Red Bulls, but thanks to that great little monkey's paw curl, a lot of their opportunities just went wide of the net.
One of the key players for New York was Dane Richards. He's a lightning quick defender who was key to connecting passes from the back line to the front attacking. And the Crew knew that they needed to shut him down, and the task fell squarely on the shoulders of Alejandro Moreno, who was on the same side. In an interview with 97.1 The Fan's JD Smith on his podcast, The Cup, Moreno describes how the Crew decided to force Richards inside so that he would be forced to dribble through traffic instead of down the sideline in order to get the ball up front like he usually would. This proved to be effective and limited Richards throughout the game and forced him to use his non-dominant left foot to make passes instead. And the first 30 minutes were filled with a lot of tension, right? 3 shots from both sides. All of them led to misses, and 1 yellow card was shown to Chris Leitch after a very late tackle on Robbie Rogers. But beyond that, it was back and forth from both teams. Every team had their chance. But then in the 31st minute, the Crew broke the seal.
That's right. The Crew went Morbius mode. From just around half field, Guillermo Barros Scalotto, good old GBS, muscles the ball away from Vanderberg and sends it down the line to Alejandro Moreno, who jukes a defender and slips past the goalkeeper on the far side into the net. The Crew had taken the lead just before halftime and went into the locker room feeling very confident. But that confidence wasn't that long-lived once the second half started. A couple of first half knocks led to the Crew coming out of the locker room a bit sluggish.
In the 51st minute, Red Bulls struck back quickly with a wonderful pass through the defense from Dane Richards and John Wolenek, who slides it under the Crew goalkeeper, Will Hesmer, to score in the 51st minute and make it 1-1. But the Crew were quick to respond. And after a failed attacking run that led to a corner on the northwest corner of the stadium, you can see on the broadcast that all of the Nordic fans are there chanting and bowing down to great Guillermo as he sends a beautiful corner in, which found itself directly placed on top of the forehead of Chad Marshall, who blasts it back into the back of the net. And the Crew now led 2-1, just 2 minutes after conceding the goal to Red Bulls. Now, after being ahead 2-1 and the game's, getting closer to the end, they decide to shift into a more defensive position. The Red Bulls are now forced to attack a lot more and play a lot more aggressively. They played a lot of long balls through and a lot of through balls to create passes. And thankfully, it didn't end up in anything crazy in the second half. But the Crew managed to retain their defensive formation and see out the rest of the game.
The Red Bulls had to create some chances, and they did. With Will Hesmer had to make 8 saves during the course of the game and forced a hard tackle from Gino Padula to stop a run from Dane Richards. But the Crew was not done yet. In the 82nd minute, they performed one of the best goals in the Crew's 2008. Guillermo once again receives the ball off a poor clearing pass by the Red Bulls and sees Frankie Hayduck running behind the defenders. Guillermo lobs the ball up and Frankie heads it over Danny Sapero and into the net. When interviewed on the cup, Frankie said he initially thought he was offside, but the flag stayed down and the goal went down in history. 3-1 was the final score, and the Crew had won their first cup, vindicating all of those years in the 90s where they lost to DC United.
2008 season is what I consider to be one of the most influential Crew seasons ever, and it set the team on a trajectory to solidify themselves as one of the best in the MLS.
Try to move that, Daddy Don.
Yeah, try to get rid of that. Speaking of Dong Arbor, there's a great gaffe during the trophy ceremony where he's like, "I want to present the trophy to the captain of the Columbus Crew, Guillermo Barro Escalotto," who Guillermo wasn't the captain of the team. It was actually Frankie Hayduck. And I don't remember the guy's name, but whoever was like the MC of it, he was like, "Actually, it's Frankie Hayduck." And so then Frankie receives the trophy and then they all celebrate. But I just thought that was so funny that it really is very Don Garber that he couldn't be bothered to do a little bit of research about the Crew for like 5 minutes.
He could have just looked at who was wearing the armband.
I guess he didn't really need to.
He had his eyes closed during the whole game.
That's what it was. Yeah, he was just off doing Don Garber things, man. We can't really describe what he's doing these days. We're never going to know what Don's doing. The 2008 final is I cherish it pretty deeply, but this is a little bit before my time. I started watching when I was in high school around like 2012. So it's in a deep place in my heart off of like a statistical fascination. I like to see the trajectory that the 2008 Cup stands them on, and then seeing the ups and downs that they go from there into the modern day is really interesting.
The note about Dane Richards is really good because I actually, when I was prepping this, I texted my pops and I go, prepping this story way back when, and I'm watching highlights, and that was one of the first players my pops he is now, but he wasn't a big soccer guy. But when Dane Richards got on the ball, my dad got excited because Dane Richards was fast.
Oh yeah,
and Fastic was good to Pops, and
I remember when we re-listened to the Cup. Gino Padula talked about Dane Richards like so much during that interview. He's like, he said this guy is so fast. We have to. That was part of the whole plan, was to figure out a way to nail down this one guy, because if you give him free reign of the whole field, he's just gonna speed right past you. And actually Gino Padula had to end up giving a yellow card because he had to make a hard tackle and in order to stop a run. That just so much speed on that Red Bull team that you had to foul them or give up, man. There's no way around it.
Yeah, well, and the coaching point was really good there, right? Force him inside, because what Dane Richards was very fast. What Dane Richards was not was two-footed. Man did not have a second foot to save his life, and good coaching point there to keep him on. Y'all, thanks so much for joining us, for being the first ever MLS History Retold guest. That was really, really fun. We loved your insights. Connor, I'm glad you've got a new roommate. I think that's awesome. I'm really excited for
We
more
love to
of
make
that.
history.
Guys, take a little bit of time. Tell people where to find you.
Wait, hold on.
I was gonna say,
didn't
before
talk
we
about the
get
Zog
really
guy.
going,
I
we
was-
have something for
if
you,
if
Andrew.
you didn't cut me off, Connor, because you never have the patience to let me finish. I was
But
going to say,
maybe more people will be inclined to check out after the Zog facts.
and here we go again, cutting me off. I was going to say, give us where to find you, what you're about, and hit us with a couple Zog facts before you get out of here. That's
Okay.
where I was going to go with that until Mr. Impatient down at the bottom of my screen.
I needed to make sure that we had Zog facts in here.
Get out of here.
Listen, Connor is passionate about the Zogs, and I think that's beautiful as the number one Zog fan.
ever since we had you know what Andrew, what it might be is that we had Connor on our show a few weeks ago, and so since we've kind of indoctrinated him into the Zog fandom, so he's a lot more excited about it than you are. He's just like, I gotta get to the Zogs. We gotta talk about the Zogs, man.
To quote Connor after your episode, I boycott the podcast if we don't talk about the Zogs at some point. So
Yes,
legally, contractually obligated to speak about them at some point in a future.
Thank you for doing the
thinking
Lord's work, Connor. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I was spreading the
Connor
good word.
Wright, number two Zogs fan.
Yeah.
So
I'll update it.
John and I, we do the Into the Crewniverse podcast. You can find us on basically every podcast platform there is. Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, all the nines. We do a mostly weekly podcast that's about the history of the Columbus Crew. We also talk about the most recent games and things like that. You can find us on Twitter at Crewniverse Pod. You can also find us on Instagram, also at Crewniverse Pod. And we also have an email box set up. So if you have any questions about the crews, things you want us to talk about, if you want to talk smack coming into a game, please send us an email. We love doing that. We have that at intothecrewniverse@gmail.com. But seeing as we are the highest ranking Zogs fans here, we have three of the highest ranking Zogs fans here. We thought we would bring you guys a fun little game. John, do you have a two truths and a lie for us?
I do. So a bit that we used to do before I ran out of Zogs facts was I would hit Way with two true Zogs facts and one fake one that I would make up. And I'm bringing back a favorite here, but the rest are new. So one of them is returning. I'll tell you my sources afterwards because I think you'll be very interested. So the first is a lot of people think that the term Zog is like just a nonsense word, but it actually comes from a Scandinavian term that roughly translates to heroic one. So it's kind of like they're a group of Scandinavian heroes. I don't know where the owner, Kinsley Nice, I don't know why he decided to go Scandinavian with it. I don't know if he's of Scandinavian descent, but that's fact number one. Fact number two, as we talked about previously, one of the crew's star players, Brian McBride, actually tried out for the Zogs in their first season. But I don't believe he ever became part of the team. And the third one is before the first match of the Zogs, their founder was brought a briefcase full of cash from the Columbus mob.
right, boys. What do you think John is lying about? Two of those Zog facts are real, and one of those Zog facts is totally fake and made up.
I did forget to put on my really good Zog background.
Oh, the Zog background.
Sorry about that.
My instant gut feeling was like all of them had a hint of truth to them, but one of them wasn't as true as the others. And that second one where you were like, oh, I don't think he actually made the team. I have a feeling he played like twice for the Zogs right before they went down. So I'm gonna go number 2.
All right, Connor, what about you?
Connor, you have to get this right as the number 2 Zogs fan in the country. Like, if we're
gonna knock you down a few pegs if you can't get this one right, man.
I'm the number 2 fan for a reason. It's because I'm not fully up to date on my Zog facts. So I was kind of thinking number 2. Also, I was trying to remember when we had briefly talked about the Zogs, because I think I Googled it the last time when you first mentioned it. I'm trying to remember what period they played in.
They played in the late 80s. This would be about
MLS.
This would be about 85 to, I think they lasted 2 or 3 years. So they started in 85. They ended probably around 88.
As I'm trying to think timeline wise for McBride when that would be. Like,
it's a toughie for sure.
He'd be definitely pretty young. I think I'm leaning towards number 2 as well, but right. Different reasons from Andrew. I don't think it's it's like a slight twist to the actual truth. Like I'm thinking that McBride never tried out for the Zogs.
Okay.
So, all right, John, hit him with the hammer.
Let's go one by one. So first of all, the term Zog doesn't mean anything.
It's nothing.
It's a nonsense.
It's a totally made up word. That and the Zigs. There was a women's team that was called the Zigs.
Their sister team, the Zigs. Yeah.
Totally made up.
Brian McBride did, in fact, try out for the Zogs in their first season. I don't have confirmation, but I don't think he ever joined the team. And my source for that is an email I got from Kinsley Nice.
We managed to get in contact with Kinsley Nice, the owner of the Zogs, and he sent us an email that included that little tidbit, which I was so happy that we managed to even get him to talk to us, but secondly that he gave us some great little more delicious morsels.
Now, the other thing that I feel like we should talk about for a second is this briefcase of cash from the mob.
That's our favorite point. We love to talk about it. It's my
favorite one. So 2 fun facts about that. Firstly, Kinsley Nice was familiar with like the mob because he was previously a police officer, so he knew this guy. Secondly, the briefcase, not the money, but the briefcase that it was given to him in was stolen out of the ticket office.
Yeah, they just like left it in the ticket booth one day and somebody swiped it.
And so when he gave the money back, he gave it to them in another briefcase, and they were like, is the money here? Like, we don't really care about the briefcase.
Yeah, he was like, I have to go out and get a new briefcase because the other one got stolen.
When someone gives you money in a briefcase, you got to give it back in another briefcase.
In another very nice briefcase.
Wait, did you say McBride tried out the first year of the Zogs?
Yes, the Zogs only lasted like 2 seasons.
Yep, he did try out, but it was very short lived. And I'll be honest, I don't really 100% know how true that is, because this is coming straight from Kinsley Nice's mouth. And I've never met this guy, and I can't find anything on the internet that confirms this. I can tell you that there is a bit of a gap in McBride's playing career during this time. So it is totally feasible that he would have come to the Columbus and just tried out for a new team, because I'm sure, he was trying to find professional employment anywhere he could. So that's totally possible that he could have done that.
I think you both get half a point because it's unconfirmed. So it was kind of 2 lies and a truth.
We just really wanted to share that one fact just because we thought it was so fun.
I guess I dropped down to Zog number 2.5 fan.
Yeah, the 2.5.
Connor, you and I can share second place. It's okay. That's fine. I'll have you just sit right next to me on the second podium.
What that would make McBride like what, 14 years old when he would have tried out?
Yeah, he was trying out. He was trying out with some German clubs at about the same time. Some like German second division like academy teams. He was trying out for the same and he actually played for a couple of those teams very briefly before he got his start with the Crew as their first draft pick.
Okay,
yeah, very interesting career that Brian McBride had. Very very like guerrilla tactics that was back in the 90s for a lot of American soccer players.
Yeah, he definitely has a really interesting career, especially what he was able to do over in England. I mean, he played for Fulham for like 140 games, and he got a pub named after him. That's crazy.
McBride's.
Yeah, he did. And but when we talked, we went back to do an episode about old star players, and we talked about Brian McBride specifically. I found out that apparently McBride's is gone. The bar. Apparently they renovated the stadium and they got rid of it.
Yeah, I remember that.
I was really sad about that. I was like, oh man. I was like, if I ever go to England, I want to go to a Fulham game just so I can go to McBride's, and now I'm never gonna get the chance.
That's all right. We're gonna open up Anthony's over there now.
Ooh.
Just replace it with another American player.
Yeah, there you go. We just swap them out. They're all the same, basically.
Let's just make Nagby's.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm not joking, John. I think that if we could name one of the bars in lower.com, Nagby's, I would be there every day.
Yeah. That would be the one.
Absolutely.
I'm covered in water from spilling on myself.
Well, that's what you get for having the world's largest drinking glass, John. It's even bigger than my 2012 MLS Crew Cup with.
If there's one thing I am, it's committed to the bit.
On it. Can I say something about this weird cup? Can you guys see this? Why are Will Trapp's arms so small? Why did they make his arms so little?
Dude was like a rookie that year. Probably hadn't seen the inside of a gym yet.
Well, they look like really short to me. I don't know what it is about this cup, but I decided to bring this one out because it's the oldest cup that I have and also the biggest one because I knew I was going to talk a lot.
Full of lead paint.
Yeah, it's delicious lead paint.
Well,
this is what I bring to our podcast, by the way. Our gimmick is that I know nothing about soccer, so I just do bits.
There you go. Well, everybody needs something like that. That's what Connor brings too.
We gotta have a straight man and we gotta have a goofy little guy, and that's what John is. He's the goofy little guy.
Well, want to thank you guys again for jumping on. We really enjoyed having you here and all your little tidbits that you brought in. Like I said, if you guys enjoyed listening to what they got to do, make sure you go give them a follow, check them out. And stick around with what we do as well, because we were probably going to have them on again at some point contractually so that Connor doesn't quit to talk Zogs. So thanks again, guys, for jumping on. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you're following us wherever you get your podcasts. So you know when we next go live. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, so you can see all of our clips and interact with us. We did just break 500 subs on YouTube, so thanks for everybody for helping us get
Congratulations, boys.
Congratulations.
On to the next 500. Connor doesn't know this yet, but every time we get an extra sub, it's an extra day of work. So soon enough, we'll be. No, thanks so much for helping us get there, and thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.